Welcome to DeepGram's Voice of the Future podcast, aka Our Favorite Nerds. At DeepGram, we're obsessed with voice, and this podcast is our exploration of the exciting emerging world of voice technology. I'm your host today, Sam Zegas, VP of Operations at DeepGram, and our guest is Todd Fisher, co-founder and CEO of CallTrackingMetrics. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Thank you. So good to be here.
So we affectionately call our podcast Our Favorite Nerds, and of course, you're one of them. So maybe you could start by telling us what kind of a nerd you are.
That's awesome. So I'm the kind of nerd, I guess, that I really like to solve problems. I like to learn new things. I'm driven to just learn more about what's going on in the world and how things that we are doing in software can apply, but also in the physical world can solve problems. Kind of like to get my hands dirty. It's fun. I think that kind of is the kind of nerd I am. I think I like to get in there and solve a problem. So I work best when there's a problem to solve.
You were telling me earlier that you, in the last few years, have gone into learning about electronics and circuit boards and things like that. What has that journey been like for you?
Oh yeah, it's been pretty amazing. So I've been a software engineer pretty much my whole career, since the very early days of my life. Been doing things on computers and software, and I've always been fascinated by electronics, but I never really took the plunge. And it was kind of neat also in my 40s to be okay, I'm going to learn something new, right? Because it's I've just been a software engineer forever, and so knowing how to write programs just kind of is like writing English or something. And so it was really hard to open up a data sheet and be what is this chip and how does it work and what's a capacitor and what's a resistor and how do they all interact with each other, and what's the difference between positive and negative, and just sort of to once again go back and go through these hurdles of learning something new, and having that experience of not knowing anything and being oh my God, I'm gonna how do I learn this? And so to me that was really kind of the coolest part. 2 years in and kind of on nights and weekends, right? Nights and weekends warrior, what is it? A weekend warrior. Because with this job, there's not that much free time, right? So
you can imagine
little bits of free time here and there. Read a data sheet, watch a YouTube video. YouTube University is what a lot of folks like to call it these days. I went there, and it was very enlightening. Now we have what we call, we'll be releasing soon CTM powered status lights, which are fully integrated circuit boards that you can essentially attach to a desk, and it will automatically, without being connected to your computer, change the light color based on the status of the agent. And hopefully it's pretty much hands-free. But one thing I'll tell you is anything, there'll be glitches because it's software. There's things to learn about that, so.
That's really interesting when those two different parts of your life collide that way. And kudos to you for going back and trying to learn something brand new as an adult. I've done that, and it is really uncomfortable to have your comfort zone of knowledge and then suddenly to leave it. It's a challenge for sure.
It's crazy. It's whoa, what is this new stuff? Yeah.
Well, great. Why don't you give us an introduction to CallTrackingMetrics, what you do, what your mission is, all of that.
Cool. So CallTrackingMetrics, CallTrackingMetrics is sort of one of my children. It's growing and it's always evolving. And we started it around 2011, 2012, and our mission is really to provide communication software and marketing attribution to all types of businesses, right? And what we have found is that it's really best if we sort of approach it as a how can we help that business operate better? Where are the opportunities for efficiency with respect to communications, and how do we help glean insights from that communications with the business's customers to help them optimize, their sales, their marketing, their targeting, their their automation around understanding whether or not this was a good or bad call, but really getting into the details of what were some of the details that are meaningful about that phone call, and can we extract that out, and can we get that into your CRM in a efficient way that doesn't require you to do a lot of manual, typing or bookkeeping. I find that sometimes going way back to when I started, somebody brought a spreadsheet to me and said, "Hey, this is what I do to keep track of my child's healthcare." This was back in 2000. And we said, oh, well, let's turn this series of spreadsheets into software. And so I find that still today we'll encounter a business that has been keeping track of their leads in a spreadsheet, and they've been following up by calling through a spreadsheet, or keeping track of conversions and sales in a spreadsheet. And any opportunity for us to kind of work with that business and think about how can we automate that and alleviate the burden so that they can focus more on the interesting conversations with their customers, and of course help their customers even more, right, in the process.
So you're really a platform that provides sales enablement and tooling so that you can automate marketing attribution and increase the performance of sales teams, it sounds like.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I would say it is a journey of discovery of who we are and how we can help our customers best. And that is probably the best way to describe what we are today to anyone that comes to seeking us out. I think we've become pretty darn good at this through a number of features, but mostly it's all been driven by conversations with customers around how can we help them, right? Understanding their particular needs has always driven us, and probably always will drive us. So
that's great. Of course, there's a lot of language processing that goes into doing that sort of work well, both in the transcription side and in the speech understanding side, understanding the intent and the meaning of what people are talking about. Are you mostly doing real-time use cases, or are you doing things that are asynchronous as well?
We're doing both. Yeah. So we'll be doing real time and asynchronous. I'd say the vast majority of our customers probably rely on the asynchronous side of the analysis, simply because, when you think about like processing an audio file to determine whether or not there was a sale made or not, is not typically something that has to be immediate. So it's often that it just makes sense to allow the call to finish, process all the things, and then you can look at both the understanding of the what was said in the call and compare it to the other facts that you may have collected, right? So if there was an agent on the call, did they record something into a CRM, and can we, align these things together to get a better picture, and then make a decision about how to send this up to, say, a Google Ads for conversion tracking, right?
Yeah, that's fascinating. One of the trends that we really watch at DeepGram is the idea that actioning from long conversations will become more and more usable as time goes on, as accuracy improves, as our analysis of intent and your analysis of intent gets more sophisticated. The idea that a machine could listen to a long conversation and then take action automatically as a result is just a really promising future. Yes,
I think it's phenomenal. And I think that I would reflect on the fact that, like, back in 2019, I'd say, if you look at the sort of the way things were going in 2019, a lot of folks were very, very concerned over, oh my God, we're going to, automate away all the jobs, right? Mm-hmm. And now flash forward to now, and it's like, we don't have enough people to do all the jobs. I wish we had more automation, right? And so I think that the more and more we focus on having meaningful interactions with other people, right? Like what we're doing right now, and taking out and not having to worry as much about the manual process of having somebody else listen to our conversation, like for, hours and hours on end, and instead allow computers to do the sort of the manual work of listening and extracting the meaningful information. Then I think people like us can, and people around the world, right, can have more meaningful interaction and accomplish more, right? So it actually increases productivity, and it allows people to do more, and that's just a good thing, right, in general. So
I agree that is an interesting connection there, because I too have been hearing for a long time about how automation will reduce the need for human workers, and yet it's actually just creating new and different opportunities for human workers to be more productive or more engaged.
Yes. which I think leads to a better quality of life too for everyone involved, right? Because if you get to use your brain in different ways, right? I think it's a more interesting exercise of the mind, and most likely keeps your day interesting and maybe goes faster, right?
Yeah,
So I think it's a good
definitely.
thing. Yeah.
How would you say you're different than your competitors? What's different about you?
Cool. Yeah, so I think it's interesting because we compete with a lot of different types of businesses.
Mhm.
But what's probably most unique about us, I'd say number one, at least I think this is unique about us, is probably our approach to our customer. But moreover, it's what we provide as a software solution. And that is we provide both the communications tools integrated into one platform and the marketing attribution system. So when you think about a typical call tracking company, they might be thinking about just how do you get the attribution data from a phone call to an AdWords or Google Ads nowadays. And I think that while that's a very interesting problem to solve, I'd say that it's probably been solved pretty well over the last decade. And so what's more interesting now is how do we take all the data and provide you with a full experience, right? End-to-end experience. So you can go out and you can buy a very expensive phone system, which has all the whiz-bang reporting features. You can then go out and buy the attribution platform, which has all the whiz-bang reporting capability. Or you can just buy a CallTrackingMetrics and it has it all included. And it's all integrated together already with workflow automation, a wonderful integration with DeepGram that enables many, many types of voice and speech analysis and signal processing that I think is really, really top notch. Thanks to DeepGram's amazing speech recognition capabilities. So
It's great. Glad to hear it.
Yeah. I mean, hey, promote, but it's true. I should share, like, before working with DeepGram, we've worked with, well, first I tried to roll my own because in university, I studied machine learning and had a pretty good understanding of how we could do, speech to text processing. And so did a lot of open source work on this. Ultimately decided, this is going to be a lot of manual labor, a lot of effort to build a really good machine learning model. We have a lot of things to focus on. And so it sort of speaks to the value of what we provide, which is we pull together the best vendors and capabilities into one platform and offer them up in an automated way. So you can program our platform basically without being a programmer.
Yeah, that's great. We are honored to be part of your stack. It's a very difficult technical challenge to take an unstructured data type like audio and turn it into something structured like text, because there's so much variability and idiosyncrasy in the way that people generate speech audio that you then need to collapse down. It's a very interesting challenge and one that we love to work with every day.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So I'm curious, what is the hardest part of the work that you're doing today? What frontier are you trying to push out these days?
I think probably the hardest part right now is scale, and not so much scale in terms of the customer base as much as it is scale in terms of the types of problems we're trying to solve with respect to automation. So we want to make it easier and easier for our customers to never have to do anything manually, right? I feel like, or repetitiveness, right? We want to kind of eliminate all the repetition. So I've been telling our teams and folks on the team, anytime you encounter, especially on our professional services team, anytime you encounter something where you find that you're needing to do something more than one time, bring it to my attention, let us know, so that like that can be our focus, right? Is how do we eliminate multiple clicks to accomplish a goal, but more so multiple same clicks to accomplish the same goal for many things, right? Like, so we have ad agencies with us that maybe have thousands of accounts and thousands of small business customers or big customers. And I want to seek out a way for them to never have to do the same thing more than once, right? Because that would be insane, right? So we're trying to minimize that, and I think that's one of the hardest things. And part of that is also we're trying to cater to more markets, more international markets. And so getting into these different markets and working with people abroad is very interesting. Never would have dreamed of what that would have been like, but here we go. So yeah.
So you have multiple languages in scope now?
We do, yeah. We do, yeah. And so again, it helps that DeepGram has the different abilities to do transcriptions in different languages. That's really, really valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and that's an interesting challenge in itself as we think about how we approach new languages. Anything that you do for English related to analyzing intent or working on summarization or something like that, all of these different things that we research, it's completely different every time you start a new language. You really need to start thinking about how you label and tag and train to do those sorts of tasks in a language other than English.
Yeah, I imagine that's a big hurdle. Yeah.
So how does machine learning fit into your solution in general? Where does that come in?
Yeah, it's good. It's a great question. So, so in general, I try to look at it in terms of what problems can we solve, right? So there's a lot of problems we can solve by just looking at the data and making decisions on the data, right? So machine learning should give us the ability to kind of like look for maybe patterns across multiple data points, classification. So we think about like what was just said in this snippet of a conversation, and can we classify that in a sort of a meaningful or actionable way? Like, perhaps in this snippet of text, they indicated that, like for example, can you answer the question of did they provide you with the appointment date, right? So that would be, I think, a good use case for us to invest in machine learning, right? Because how you might express the confirmation of an appointment date may be different than how I might do it, right? And so I think a machine learning model could be really good at that kind of problem. But then the subsequent follow-up problem is more like, is that appointment date a time in the future? And is it a time in the future that is reasonable, right? That we can probably solve without machine learning, right? Because we could just say, is it greater than now? And is it less than maybe some threshold of realistic future appointment date, right? That would be relevant to the business that is collecting that appointment date. Yeah, that was okay. So see, that's the kind of nerd I am. I like to think about all the like stupid details.
Someone's gotta, yeah, no, it's really quite important. So you're using machine learning for conversational analysis type tasks.
Yes.
I think anyone who is involved in machine learning these days should be thinking a lot about bias. Most people do have some sort of a discussion going on about bias. How does bias come into your consideration of ML?
I think that's a really cool question. So currently, with the way I'm thinking about it, is that we're kind of thinking about it in a very simple level. So we're thinking about it in terms of like small snippets of text, right? And so I haven't really thought that bias could inflict its evils into those little snippets. Well, primarily because the use cases that we're focused on right now would be intent-based. So like you have expressed the appointment date to me, right? Or you've expressed your account ID to me, or you've, expressed your willingness to purchase, right? I do think that one of the ways we might solve some of the biases, though, I'm thinking maybe the emotion detection capabilities of DeepGram could play a role in this, right? Because if it has the ability to maybe detect sarcasm, which I'm not sure if that's going to ever happen, but if we have like sarcasm kind of capabilities, then I would think that could play a pretty handy role in identifying, the sort of the misintent of a snippet of text, right, per se, right? If we knew that, this was spoken in anger, right, versus spoken in sort of normal terms, then maybe we could flag that in some way and say we'll consider that in the at some point, right, you have to take whatever it was that was classified and how it was classified and decide, well, what should we do with that new knowledge, right? Should we respond with something or not, right? So I think maybe it becomes a variable that you could utilize to say, okay, well, in that case, I should respond this way, right?
It's such an interesting topic, and broadly under the umbrella of things that DeepGram is actively researching, we think a lot about different categories of speech understanding. Can we summarize? Can we identify a topic? Can we understand the sentiment? And some of these things are already available, by the way. If anyone goes to console.deepgram.com, you can check that out. But as you say, there's so much variability, right? Sarcasm coming from one person may sound really different than it does from another person, or sarcasm in English might take on a different form than it does if you're being sarcastic in Spanish. And these are things that we have to study and build models that can perform in a way that's actually producing useful results for people who engage with those models. We're also always thinking of bias in terms of representation of whose speech data gets into our models, making sure that we can cover all sorts of meaningful demographic slices so that anybody could submit audio to a DeepGram service and get a good result back. But it's a very difficult challenge for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The problem of bias is definitely, that is especially for training models. I think that is where it is really infectious, right? Is when you're in that training phase.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I wanted to move on to another really interesting conversation topic that you and I had recently around closed loop attribution. I think it came up in the context of if someone doesn't keep up with the latest in your space, how might they get left behind? And I'm curious if you could just expand on that topic for a bit.
Oh, sure. Yeah, so I think on the closed loop attribution side, and if they're not sort of keeping up to date on these platforms, you really want to be able to leverage software like DeepGram and CallTrackingMetrics in order to end-to-end track and provide feedback. You want this feedback loop, right? You want to be able to know that someone called your business, or maybe filled out a web form in your business, then they called, maybe there's a follow-up text conversation, but ultimately the data points that led to the sale, you want to know when that occurred, and what maybe click IDs, let's say from Google, brought that person to you, right? And then the journey there may go through a CRM where maybe the sale is finally closed. And then when it's closed, you want to be able to select the click ID that's most relevant to the attribution model that you have selected for your business, so that you can inform Google that this is the click that brought your business, in resulting in maybe you shuffling around your advertising budgets so that you get more high quality individuals like that, right? Mm-hmm. It sounds very simple, but the mechanics and the automation required to make it happen at scale is I think where a lot of attention can be given to a business to improve the growth of a business. I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense.
It does, but there's such a big ecosystem that you're working in there, connecting into ad tech and things like that. It's you probably have, I would imagine you have quite a big team working on how you engage with a system that's that complex.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, well, I'd say in the space, CallTrackingMetrics probably has one of the smaller teams, but maybe the more talented teams. I don't know. So
love to hear that. That's great.
Yeah. We run pretty lean and mean, just because I think it's a good way to do it, and keeps us honest.
Yeah, I can relate to that. We try to do the same at DeepGram too. Efficiency is definitely one of our top priorities here.
It's good. It's good. Yeah.
Great. I wanted to ask if there's any events or opportunities to connect with you or your team coming up this summer that you want to make the listeners aware of.
Oh, sure. I appreciate that. So we at CallTrackingMetrics are going to have what we're calling a very googly July, where we're going to be announcing many new features with respect to how we integrate with Google, Google Ads, Google Analytics, Google Business Chat, and some other capabilities in there along the way. And we're pretty excited that our googly July, and we'd love to have as many folks as possible around to kind of participate. So I think should be pretty exciting.
Fantastic. Well, cool. We're almost at the end here, but before we go, let's take a minute to remember just how far technology has come, even in our lifetime. So We always close this way. I'm going to ask you to explain a piece of outdated technology like you would to a kid who was born after 2010. So this person is 10 to 12 years old, and they've lived their whole lives in the era of the iPhone. Of course, the size and the power of our devices is in part dependent on chip size. So I'm curious how you would explain the impact of chip size to someone born after 2010.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, that device you're holding in your hands that you actually probably never remove from your hand and or wrist, right, is only possible because the chip sizes have gotten so dramatically much smaller. The 286 desktop PC that weighed probably 50 pounds when I was that age is less of a computer than the iPhones they carry in their hands today, right? Pretty amazing to think about. I mean, chip sizes, it's an incredible thing, how much smaller they become, what it means in terms of what we can do. It's easy to think, people have said for a while, oh, Moore's law is over, but there's so many ways in which it is not, that it's just tremendously amazing for the future of the world and just what we can do. So I think there's a lot of things to be optimistic about with respect to how that space is evolving and evolving so fast. And it really does mean that, the artificial intelligence kind of capabilities are possible now because of that silicon becoming that much more efficient, if it's even silicon anymore. Yeah.
That's great. I love to end on that note of optimism. Well, 10-year-olds around the world are thanking you for your explanation. And to all the adults listening out there, it's amazing just to think about how far technology has come even in our lifetimes.
Awesome.
Todd, thanks so much for being one of our favorite nerds. It's been great talking to you today.
Likewise.
To all our listeners out there, thanks for tuning in. Come back or come check us out for more info. We are obviously DeepGram and CallTrackingMetrics. That's CallTrackingMetrics.com. And of course, you can find us at deepgram.com and at DeepGram AI across all of our socials. So with that, we're out. Catch you next time.